Lizards are among some of the best pet reptiles that you can keep, but not all lizards are great, and in fact, these are the 5 you definitely don't want to keep, and 5 you do instead. The great thing about lizards, well, basically all reptiles, but especially lizards, is they come in all different types. Not only size and shape and color and pattern and care, but just in general, the personalities of them are very different and very obvious. So there's animals that are great for some people, but these 5 are the worst just for most people. But then I'll give you an alternative to each one, so that if you like that one, but you don't want to, you know what I'm trying to say. Let's just get started. Gold tegus, otherwise known as golden tegus. And these are animals that you might not even know exist because not many people care for them anymore. These used to be really popular, and in fact, now they're still really cheap. And if you want a tegu, generally what you're talking about is a black and white tegu, maybe a red tegu, but most people aren't saying, I really wish I could have a gold tegu. And these are a South American lizard. They're also from Trinidad, so they're from the same part of the world as the black and whites, which, spoiler alert, is the one that I'm gonna tell you to get instead. And this is kind of backwards, because normally on these lists, the bigger the lizard, the worse they are for most people, just because they take so much space, and with much space comes lighting issues and humidity and heat that is way harder than in a smaller space. And then there's the temperament issue, and if a bigger lizard were to bite you, even if accidentally, it's gonna hurt more than a small lizard. Not saying that they're gonna try to bite you, but this is the exception, because gold tegus are around 2 to 3 feet, something like that. And Argentine black and white tegus are around 4 feet, something like that. So why would I want you to get the bigger one? Well, because the smaller one, the golden tegus, are cantankerous. These animals don't want anything to do with you. They don't want to be part of your friend group. They're not coming to Thanksgiving dinner. These animals don't want to be pet. Where a black and white tegu, for the most part, is gonna be really easy. They're gonna be super duper chill. There's exceptions to every rule, and there are exceptions with the golden tegu, but most of the time these animals aren't the best in terms of tegus or large lizards. Because I do think a 2 to 3 foot lizard, when they're that substantial in size, because they're pretty girthy too, is a pretty big lizard and takes a big space. I will say the black and white tegu obviously takes a ton of room, right? So these enclosures here that I have, I don't know how well you can see them, but those are big enclosures, right? That's what you need for a tegu or one of the big lizards, where you could probably get away with something slightly smaller for the golden tegu. An 8x4x4 enclosure is big. There's just no getting around it. But if you want a big animal in a big enclosure, but you want it to be more handleable and just more chill in general, go for it. They have basically the same diet, very similar care requirements, just one is clearly better than the other. And keep in mind, all of these things are based on my opinion. And if you disagree, let me know in the comments section. Maybe you can change my mind. Number 4, surprising absolutely nobody, tokay geckos. Now, tokay geckos are probably the most beautiful gecko on Earth. Like, they just are. They're so freaking cool. But these Southeast Asian geckos are, well, loud, first of all. They have this tokay type bark to them. Not only that, but these animals are cantankerous and fast, and when they bite, it does hurt. Now, I'm not saying they're monsters, okay? Tokay geckos are not monsters by any means. They're not trying to go out and get you, but they're just not the most handleable gecko. And if you want a big gecko, because they are big, then these are a really good one to display. But if you want an animal that's cool to look at, and is nocturnal just like the tokay, and can make noise just like the tokay, and is a massive gecko just like the tokay, did I say that already? Get a Leachianus gecko. In my opinion, I know that they're not quite as vibrant and Pokemon looking, and they're not as fast. However, I just think they're a better option. And arguably, are tokays really bigger than Leachianus geckos? No, because Leachianus geckos are the biggest gecko in the world, where tokays are number 2. So if you want the biggest gecko in the world, it's a better gecko than the second biggest gecko. And if you want to tell your friends, hey, look what I got, they're really impressive. And sometimes they can be cantankerous too. I actually have a Patreon supporter, thanks everyone, Patreon, you guys are awesome, that told me she just rehomed hers because she couldn't tame it down enough to be handleable. However, mine is sweet as punch. And keep in mind with the Leachianus geckos, the diet is a little bit easier. You still have to feed them insects, but you also can feed, for the most part, a gecko diet. Something like Pangea, for example. I've talked about it a million times on the channel before, but Pangea just got a lot easier to get for you and me because my friends at Chewy now stock Pangea on their website. And it couldn't be any easier to use this stuff. You literally pour it into a cup, pour a little bit of water, mix it up, wham bam, Bob's your uncle, happy Leachianus gecko. But you still have to feed feeders, which can be expensive. And unless you hit the link below, my friends at Chewy are giving you, the followers of Wickens Wicked Reptiles, 35% off their first auto ship of select feeders from Flukers. So for example, I feed my Leachianus geckos crickets all the time. If you want crickets and you're thinking, well, it's kind of annoying because I have to go to the store or I have to keep them in my house, but it's annoying because they're loud, you don't. You can just get an auto ship, which means it ships in intervals and you're saving, like I said, 35% off your first auto ship. And if you want to skip a week, you can. And if you want to cancel, you can, and there's no penalty. And that's why I partnered with today's sponsor, Chewy, because they're a US ARC Gold member. These aren't people that are pretending to be reptile people to get your business. These are real reptile people who really care. They're as committed to our scaly friends as they are dogs and cats. And they provide prices only a big business can, but the ethics that usually only small businesses could. So if you've ever wished you could have the convenience and cost savings of a big brand without supporting a brand that does shady animal sales, you now can. Chewy doesn't do live animal sales, and if you hit the link below, 35% off right now on select Flukers live feeders on your first auto ship. Plus, once you're done feeding your Leachianus geckos, they're just impressive to look at, and they're not quite as fast in my experience as Tokays, and they're not as apt to bite. So very similar in terms of care requirements, a little bit cooler maybe for the Leachianus geckos. And if you don't like leachies, maybe get yourself a Chihuahua gecko. Those are great too, a little bit smaller. And realistically, Cresties, Chihuahuas, Gargoyles, Saracenoriums, if you can get one, and Leachianus are all very, very similar. They're from New Caledonia, and they're all pretty awesome. Number 3, Chinese water dragons. Okay, Chinese water dragons are probably the cheapest pet in a lot of pet stores. They used to be for sure, especially 10 years ago. The problem is they need height because they need to climb. They need water that is filtered and heated, and they're gonna need lots of space horizontally. So you have an animal, it's gonna cost $40 or something like that from your pet store, and then now you need a grow tent or something the equivalent in PVC, which is gonna be really expensive, and then running it's gonna be expensive, and outfitting it's gonna be expensive, and just the whole thing's gonna be expensive. So the problem I see is most people want a cheap pet, and this isn't one. That is the reason, and it's a weird one, I think that Australian water dragons are better. Not only are they about a foot smaller, but they still need the similar enclosure requirements, maybe a little bit smaller. I think that probably around the same size. But they don't have that, well, it's a cheap animal thing, because they're not cheap. They're a decent price. And I know this sounds crazy. Oh, well, it's more expensive, so it's better. Well, I just think it's better for most people because people are attracted to the small price tag and then don't take care of it properly. And then you get guys like Alex's Agamas, who's doing a great job taking animals in, but look at their faces, because most people keep them in small glass and then they rub their faces off. Like literally look at their faces being rubbed off, and then you have to get a guy like Alex to take them in and rescue them, where you don't see that with other, okay. Anyway, off my soapbox, one more option, Chinese crocodile lizards. Now, here's the thing. I am not in any way supporting poaching of these animals or taking them in wild caught. However, if by luck, you can get these amazing, super cool, and much smaller lizards that also are semi-aquatic and semi-arboreal, well, they'll climb a bit, but definitely semi-aquatic, they are, I think, the best option. It's just really hard to find them captive bred. But number 2 is a little bit more obvious, green iguanas. Now, green iguanas, I have one. That's who's making all the noise over here, by the way. He's inside, he's on house arrest right now because it's a little bit too cold. However, during the summer, I have this guy in a really big enclosure, and it costs a lot of money to build these enclosures. Well, it really didn't cost a lot because I use repurposed materials. But if you live in a place like I do where it's cold for most of the year, you're gonna have to have something inside too. If you live in a place where it's warmer, okay, don't worry about my griping about how much space they take up, but they still take up quite a bit of resources for food. Again, if you live in a warmer climate, easier for you because you can just grow a garden outside. They are herbivores, but they're a 5-foot lizard that can be a little cantankerous, maybe not the best animal for most people, the tail whips and potential. I mean, some of them are great. my boy Doug there is chill. He is cool as a cucumber. But if you really are dead set on an iguana, I think there's two better options. First one, I know you guys are gonna call it a flex, a Fiji banded iguana. Okay, I'll keep it short because I know that my friends in the US, who most of you who watch these are American, can't keep them. They're illegal there. So these are a smaller lizard. They're quite a bit smaller. I mean, like a fifth of the size or something like that. They're more beautiful, they're more handleable, they're more chill, they eat less, they have a smaller enclosure requirement, easier care requirements in my opinion. Overall, Fiji banded iguanas are cooler. However, they're expensive, much more expensive than a green iguana, and you can't get them in the US. But what you can get in the US if you're dead set on an iguana is a Cuban rock iguana or a rhinoceros iguana. And the reason I think these are better, even though they're around the same size, is they're terrestrial. So you don't need as big of an enclosure to take up as much space. You still need a really big enclosure, big footprint. However, it doesn't take up as much space in your house because then you can put more enclosures over top of that enclosure, or you can just put other things. So it does take up less space. Also, they're herbivores and basically have the same diet, but in general, they're more tamed out. They're easier to tame out for sure. And they're just kind of puppy dogs. They're slow and they're chill, and just in my opinion, I love them, but in Canada, we can't get those. So it's a little bit of a trade-off. And number one, this is so easy, so obvious, Nile monitor, not even close. I think that, I mean, realistically, I know people are gonna say, well, isn't a Komodo dragon worth? Okay, yeah, but how many people watching this video have access to buy a Komodo dragon? The answer is probably zero, for a personal collection anyway. Croc monitors are also worse, but in general, Nile monitor is on the list because you see them all over the place. They're really easy to find, they're really cheap, but it's a 6.5 foot lizard that has a bad attitude. Like, you know all those Instagram accounts that are dedicated to Karen screaming at people for no reason and then being violent? That is a Nile monitor most of the time. Now, the guy who edits these videos most of the time, Matt, he has one and he's doing a great job with it. The difference is Matt is an expert. He knows what he's doing, he has the resources, and he has the know-how to do it. Most people don't. And if you're dead set on a monitor, there are some great options that take up way less space. Let's talk about Ackie monitors and Kimberly Rock monitors. Mostly Ackies because they're easier to find and cheaper and more accessible. These are an animal from Australia, so even my Australian friends can keep them. They're gonna be 2 feet, something like that, maybe smaller, and they need a smaller enclosure. Lots of room to dig, all that good stuff, but it's just a better animal and less likely to be cantankerous with you. If you really want a big enclosure and you really want a big monitor to fit into it, maybe get yourself a water monitor. Asian water monitors are better in that they're not as apt to be Karen-y, I would say. They're around the same size, but they need water and there's a whole set of struggles. So let me know in the comment section below what the worst lizard is that you think, and hit the like and subscribe button while you're down there. Helps the channel, gives me motivation to make more of these videos. And the Patreon supporters, you guys get videos early. I appreciate you guys so much. You guys get discounts, you guys get one-on-ones, all of that and more for as little as $1 a month, and that's it. I do videos Mondays and Thursdays, so I'll see you in the next one.